Everybody knows that media is bad for society. According to data from the American Psychological Association, an average American youth will see 200,000 violent episodes on television before they reach 18. Can the exposure to such an extensive amount of violent stimuli influence our behavior? What about when the media is more interactive and immersive, like video games? In 2013, video games are as accessible and popular and realistic as they ever have been. Their realism is reaching a point where at the start of the year the Australian government raised the limit of video game ratings to R18 due to increased adult content in modern releases. And with more and more test studies that claim to have found links between brain activity and aggression while playing video games, we as consumers are faced with some important questions. Are video games too violent? Do they pose a threat to society? Can they only bring negative effects? The shorter answer to all of this is no. The long answer is the subject of my talk today. Over the next few minutes, I will explain that video games are not detrimental to society. The studies that claim they are based on a media effects model that has issues with how it collects and interprets data, and how the moral panic surrounding violent video games is a common theme of blame placed on new media throughout modern history in the face of difficult issues. In his book, Media Effects Research, Glenn Sparks originates media effects theory to a key event of media consumption and mass culture change in the early decades of the 20th century. The Pain Fund study that was established to coincide with the explosion of movie ticket sales in the 20s. Sparks identifies this as one of the first media studies to use scientific method. In the tests, subjects were fitted with brain-reading implements during viewing of movies to record changes in activity, while others were asked detailed psychological questions in relation to how they were influenced by the media. These days, media effects models have been reviewed and updated. Though more sophisticated, they still have its shortcomings, as pointed out in David Gauntlet's article, 10 Things Wrong with the Media Effects Model. To demonstrate this theory, I'll use a study conducted by Renee Weber in 2005 from the Michigan University. In this study, 13 test subjects were used. They were all of male and German nationality, aged between 18 and 26. The test had each test subject play a modern first-person shooter for 5 rounds of 12 minutes, while inside a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine. According to results published by Weber and his team, they found a link in the brain activity shown in the subject's aggressive behavior. Weber states, violent video games frequently have been criticized for enhancing aggressive reactions, such as aggressive cognitions and aggressive behavior. On a neurological level, we have shown this link exists. Possible problems with this study in accordance with Gauntlet's article can be identified through the methodology and its length and scope of the test. The use of artificial environment. The test fails to contextualize the material by having the subjects only play one type of video game, and it also clearly doesn't explain its objectives, only its findings are explained. Nonetheless, it was published, adding to the already large prevalence of smaller, faster tests outweighing the more careful and slower tests that will produce more accurate results, creating a lopsided idea about this media within the public, causing concern and hostility and calls for action whenever unfortunate events are weakly linked to violent video games. These events of public concern and outcry are often called moral panics. According to the sociologist Stanley Cohen, a moral panic occurs when a conditioned episode, person or groups of persons emerges to become defined as a threat to societal values and interests. In the events such as these concerning the media effects debate, it's really down to us as individuals to consider both sides of the argument. In regards to the ongoing debate in Australia whether or not to have R18 classifications for video games, people against it like Barbara Briggs tried to create a moral panic by claiming that those who are pushing for higher ratings will only increase children's exposure to unsuitable content, such as the explicit depictions of violence, inferring that all video games contain this content and that all gamers who are over the age of 18 have strong preference to this game genre. She takes into no consideration that, in fact, according to the data presented by Stephen Harrington in 2013, that the average age of Australian gamer is at 32, and at 75% of all gamers in Australia are over 18. In closing, when trying to understand the full effects of media theory on us as individuals and as a community, it is important for us to consider all the facts carefully. In regards to violence in video games, despite evidence and research, there is still no identifiable indication that violence in video games affects us all. In a report by the Australian government published in 2013 that reviewed 30 years of research into the issue of the impact of playing violent video games, it states, while there may be some short-term effects, there is no long-term effects, and that research into violent video games and aggressive behavior is contested and inconclusive. Therefore, we have no need to engage in moral panic about the issue of how these games affect our behavior. Video games are an interactive media. Not all games are vulnerable, troubled young men, with 47% of Australian gamers being female, and with both sexes showing preference to genres other than violent video games. All violent video games themselves aren't crash and on about glorified killing spree, bloodbaths designed to desensitize us.